Hey, good evening. It is great to have you guys with us tonight. I am honoured to be sitting here tonight talking about some safeguarding in a digital space with the amazing Leigh from 318. Let me just get her on the screen because she's far better to
Hi,
see.
good evening.
Hey, mate, how you getting on? You okay?
I'm brilliant, Des. Yourself?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Doing well. Actually, Leigh and I go way back. So I've been
We
a
do.
Christian for, 12 years now, and I think I've known you the whole time. Must be one of the very few. I don't
I
know whether
think
that's
you have.
a good thing or a bad
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah. So Leigh,
That's a great thing, Des.
Leigh and I actually the first alpha I ran in a school was with Leigh when you were a teacher back in the day, which it was pretty amazing. Did you want to
That's
just
right.
talk a little bit about yourself, just in case people don't know who you are?
Yeah. Some people might, some might not. My name, as Des said, is Leigh. I am work for 318. I'm the safeguarding lead for Scotland and Northern Ireland. But prior to this job, I was a teacher, as Des said, and that is very much my background. Was in education. It was also in youth work. I've been involved in youth work for about 25 years now. And that obviously goes right up to present day, whereas sort of the last few years has really been more in the children's end of things. I've got particular interest in working with children with additional needs as well, and that's really where my heart lies in my present sort of church ministry in Belfast. I did live in Glasgow for many years. I married a Glasgow man. Really loved my time in Scotland, but we're presently based back on the other side of the Irish Sea, so it is an absolute privilege to be here and spending some times with my Scottish people again. So that is me, really.
Yeah. And mate, we're really glad to have you. We know we had you at Deep Impact earlier this year. It feels so long ago that we were actually meeting in January, wasn't it?
I know, that's right. It's I don't know what's happened 2020. It's sort of needs a giant test card up to say sorry for the interruption, doesn't it?
Yeah, it feels like 34 or something. But anyway,
Yeah.
guys, we'd love for you guys to get involved with this. We've had some questions come in over the week the week that's been for Leigh to answer. So we're going to start off by answering those questions. But if you've got any thoughts, you get any comments, you get anything you'd like to ask Leigh, or situations that you want to kind of unpack, she might not have all the answers of every specific situation. She's very good. Yeah, so just fire them into the comments. We'd love to hear from you. But yeah, so Leigh, let's get started. So the first question that somebody asked was, what should I do if someone discloses an issue online? What would be your advice for that,
Okay,
pal?
that is a brilliant question to start with. Actually, I think this is something that is not uncommon in the present situation. In many respects, we treat an online disclosure just exactly the same as if it were face-to-face in real life. But there are a few unique considerations that you would need to consider. First of all, have they disclosed to you publicly online? Are they as part of a group meeting? They sent it in a private message? Can other people see or hear what they've just shared? Or have they done it in a one-to-one session with you and hopefully another approved worker there? If at all possible, you want to keep that disclosure private to respect the child or the young person who's disclosing. So if they are in a larger group setting, you then need to consider how you can manage that situation and bring that child to a safer place, albeit still online, where you perhaps bring them out of that meeting saying, let's keep that thought, let's meet offline after the youth group has finished to chat to them. You may also observe something. It may not be something that they actually say or disclose, and we'll come back to that thought in a moment. What do you do if you observe something on the screen that really causes you concern? However, what you ideally want is a situation where you're almost one-on-one. If a child is wanting to meet to disclose something online, it's good advice to have another approved worker there. That creates accountability and transparency for yourself, and minimises any risk in that respect. So just like in real life, let the child or the young person talk to you, let them express it in the words they want to use. So don't ask questions, just reflect back on what they're saying. Show acceptance and keep calm. It's a hugely important thing for someone to disclose, and it's vitally important that they feel and that they are believed. They will be looking still at your facial expressions, still at how you're responding to them. And if they don't think they're going to be believed, they will clam up and they will not share what they need to share. Never ever promise confidentiality. If a child says to you, hey, can I meet with you online? I need to talk to you about something, but you must keep it a secret. We can't do that. Okay. We can tell the child or the young person, I can keep it a secret as long as I believe that neither you nor somebody else is in immediate risk of harm or something really bad has happened. And then we're giving the child the choice before they disclose as to what they say to us, so that they've still got that control of the situation. The last thing we want to do is say, I promise to keep it a secret, and then realize, well, actually, I can't keep this a secret. I need to pass this on. And you've just become another person who then has broken the young person's trust. We want to use that trust relationship to support them. Write detailed notes as soon as possible. It's a bit like in real life. If you can at all avoid writing in front of the child, because if you're writing, you're looking down, you're looking away from them, you're losing that eye contact. So try and do it as soon as possible afterwards. You need to then pass notes on to your safeguarding coordinator. They are the point person within your church or within your organisation. And whilst you've had this one disclosure, you may not be aware of wider family circumstances or disclosures this child's made previously, or that other people have suspected something is not quite right. The coordinator is the person who holds that information together and then makes the decision to move forward with that, contact the police. Now, again, if you cannot get hold of your coordinator, or you're not sure what to do, or you and your coordinator are not sure, one of the services that 3818 operates is we have a helpline. I don't know, Des, you want to pop that number up in the screen?
Yeah, certainly.
Our helpline is open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And we are there to help you with all aspects of safeguarding, whether it is something to do with policy or it's an emergency crisis situation. Now, everyone in our safeguarding team who answers that call has come from a professional safeguarding background, so that they could have come from education, social work, healthcare, or police services. So it's not a call centre, basically, is what I'm saying that you're going through to. And they are people who are professionals and very experienced and will be able to guide you through the next steps. And it's also really important with that online disclosure, when it's concluded, that you actually get help and support for yourself. Because that can be particularly distressing on you, especially if the child is not in front of you, and you're not there to look at, well, are they safe going home? Is there somebody else that can support that child? And it's also one of those things online, if you believe that at that moment that child is actually not safe in the building or the home from where they are calling you from, then you need to contact your coordinator quickly. If you can't get hold of them, get hold of your senior pastor or your deputy coordinator, because you may well have to call the police if you believe that child is not safe at that point in time, and they will deal with that. Okay, so it really comes back to five key words: recognise, respond, record, report, and then reflect on your practice of what's just happened. So
could you just give us those again, Leigh?
Sorry, Daz?
Could you just give us those 5 words again? That was really helpful, actually.
Sure. Recognise.
Yeah.
Respond. Record. Report.
Yeah.
And reflect.
Amazing. I'm actually just going to stick them up in the chat for everybody to get them as well. So I probably spelled them wrong, but we'll try. There we go.
Yeah, right. Fantastic.
Yeah. No, that was really, really helpful. And to be honest, like I've just in case people aren't aware of the kind of subtle differences, but you guys used to be known as CC Pass, or you've evolved on since then. But I did training with you guys, and actually like this is a lot of a lot of the stuff that we're looking at online is what we would look at just in our normal practice for safeguarding, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. That was Des. We did that course together many years ago.
Yeah,
That was in Kirkintilloch, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
good old KPP.
That's right, CCPS back in the day. Yeah, we've had a name change, but we are the one and the same. We changed our name because it really didn't reflect the full scope of who we are and what we do anymore. As safeguarding and creating safer places in churches has grown quite substantially over the years. So yeah, but it is us.
Amazing. That's great. And that actually leads us on really nicely to our next question, Leigh, which is, how do I create a safe Zoom call?
Okay, so Zoom is really interesting. We've become incredibly dependent on Zoom and the online environment throughout this season of lockdown and decreasing degrees or increasing degrees, depending where you're in the country, of lockdown at present. Zoom made a very interesting policy change partway through lockdown, and they changed their policy to say that you're not allowed to actually use Zoom. You can't be an account holder or use their services if you're under 16. So that in itself, first of all, creates an issue around risk for anybody who is using Zoom with their youth group or with kids who are under that age. So you've got to consider that, and potentially then consider using other online platforms where you can engage with children according to what the license has said on them. So irrespective of which platform you use, whether that's like a Zoom or a Google Classroom or other meeting platforms, first of all, you need to risk assess and think of some of the risks that actually can happen because you're in that online environment. So just to share really some of the risks that should be kept in mind include the online environment provides a strong opportunity for grooming or sexual exploitation to happen. So we need to make sure that that is not happening in our meetings. We need to make sure that we're not actually sharing personal contact details of young people and youth workers. So, for example, in WhatsApp, that's the common place where that can happen, and people get a hold of information by looking who's in the group. They get the details that they shouldn't have. Okay. We also need to look at the risk of the type of conversation that happens in our Zoom call. We need to make it very clear, both to our youth workers, our pastoral carers, and the young people on the call, that inappropriate conversations cannot happen either like this on the screen, or they cannot happen in private chat. We need to make sure they are safe spaces. You also need to consider in Zoom, if you're putting young people into breakout rooms, that you've got one leader at least in each of the breakout rooms, so that you know the chat continues to be appropriate and that nobody has been victimized to any form of bullying or harassment within the breakout rooms. And think about the age restrictions as well. WhatsApp is 16, Zoom is 16, Facebook is 13, TikTok is 13, and it's an interesting one because it has got a lot of vulnerabilities built into the system. And even though the sign-up age is 13, the statistics show that their most prevalent user age group is age 10 to 11, which is a bit of a concern in itself. So when you get into the call itself, make sure that you've built around that Zoom call good practice. And that starts with a code of conduct for your groups. So that needs to translate into what you're actually doing, how people participate. So respectful modes of behaviour and speech, appropriate physical presentation, okay, both of the person themselves, so they shouldn't be wearing inappropriate clothing. The venue needs to be appropriate as well, and the environment that they're in. So if somebody has a poster up in the background that's totally inappropriate, then you actually need to message that, try and say, either move room or take the poster down, because it's not appropriate to be seen in the background. And the times as well, we've still got to operate within normal young people's time. So if they're children under 10 or 11, they're going to bed at 7, half 7 at night. So that event needs to happen no later than maybe 6 o'clock to allow them to have that event and get to bed. Older children, it shouldn't be going on, past 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. It's got to run within your normal youth group times as well, because out with your Zoom call, these kids still have the rest of their life with their families and so on, and that we don't want to irk parents either in that respect. Supervision, again, if at all possible, you should have checked workers who've been through a safer recruitment process and have their disclosure checks, PVGs in place. And I think we're going to come back and talk about that later, so I'll say no more about that now. Shouldn't be with any worker on their own, if at all possible. That has got a very high risk factor around it. If there is a need for a Zoom call to happen one-on-one, then that worker should have that agreed with their line manager in advance. They should have a record of the time and date, and then make a skeleton record of what was said, what the conversation was about. That is about protecting themselves as well as protecting the child, being transparent and accountable. On your Zoom calls, keep records, very much similar records, and you run those calls within the protocols of your safeguarding guidelines. Group calls, try not to record them. If you do need to record them, you need to have a very compelling reason to do so. You also need to have consent of a parent as well. And again, if anything does come up in your Zooms and your online chats, it's about equipping children and young people as well to support themselves. So giving them links to things like Childline, Child Exploitation Online Protection Centre, or CEOP, they can access easily online, and helping them help themselves. Also consider in Zoom the setup of your call and how the admin is run, so that whilst you may have one person leading the meeting, that the second person there, the co-host, is there in a capacity where they can mute and block participants if they need to be, and they can black out people's screen if anything inappropriate or illegal is displayed on a person's Zoom screen. It's really important you can do that. I have known of entire Zoom meetings that have had to be shut down immediately, and if you feel that's the appropriate action to do, then do that. And then you can follow up with each of the people involved in that Zoom call afterwards. So really the final bit of advice in terms of Zoom calls is use your organisation's accounts. Don't be using personal devices, because again, there's a higher risk in that. Kids should not have your contact details. The benefit of using organisational profiles and organisational devices is if there is any allegation made against you, then your organisation can track exactly who was on what Zoom call, when and where. And ultimately, these things get reviewed on a regular basis. What is working for you? What is still within best practice guidelines? And have you identified any particular thing that's happening in the Zoom groups that actually that needs to change, and we need to change our policy and practice to change that culture within that group?
Yeah, that's great, Leigh. That's really, really helpful. I loved what you were saying there about like having like a secondary person, like an additional person there, because that's certainly our advice with Alpha. Is always like a host and a helper, like for accountability reasons and lots of other things. But it's actually something I've I don't know whether I stole it from you. It was probably good advice that you gave me, to be fair. But I actually always make sure that I've got multiple people in any messenger groups that I have. So safeguarding, whoever the safeguarding officer is in your church should be in youth messenger groups, whether they are actually part of it or not. Like it's there as accountability. There, there's a safe record somewhere.
Very much. So for us, it's about accountable and transparent practice. And that's how we do that. It doesn't necessarily mean that your safeguarding coordinator is having to sit in on every meeting, every group, but they can check those threads, and if there's a concern, they've got access to that. And that's a good, healthy culture to have. It's not that one person is checking up on another. It's about teamwork, and it's about making sure that everyone is looked after within that context as well.
Yeah, no, I've found it really helpful over the years, just for a peace of mind thing,
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for anybody that's listening at home, feel free to He might not be at home. He could be anywhere, to be fair, the joy of the internet. But wherever you're listening from, if you've got any questions, you've got anything you'd like to ask Leigh around safeguarding or best practice, like, now's your opportunity. Feel free to start firing in messages into the comments. We can see them all here. Leigh, you mentioned briefly there about disclosure, and we said we would come back to that, but it's maybe better to think about kind of staff training and equipping. Like, you know, what do you think that's going to look like going forward? You know, lockdown doesn't seem to be ending any time in the next 2 days, which is kind of upsetting for me, but it will end at some point. What's the kind of progression looking like around some of that stuff?
I think progression at the minute, we started to make this move towards reopening everything, and over the summer, various different youth groups and activities were preparing to reopen and starting to consider getting the volunteer base back together, getting people sort of enthused and envisioned, and then looking at the practicalities and the logistics of how we run our events as well. And then depending on where you are in the country, suddenly that's not happening, we're still staying online. And then it looks like it's going to happen, and then it's not online again. So we're living in this sort of strange kind of balance, or imbalanced time, perhaps is a better word. So when we look at training, a few key things you've got to consider. First of all, the practicalities of where you hold your training. So you can do that online through a Zoom meeting or a Microsoft Teams meeting or whatever your platform of choice is. If you're not certain what to put in your training, or you don't have someone who is confident enough to do that training within your organization, do check out the 318 website. You will find when you go to the homepage, I don't know, Des, you want to put up our web address there, under the training button, if you go into that, we have adapted lots of our courses to webinar format, so we can deliver those to you irrespective of lockdown stage, basically. And within that, we are now developing Scottish context specific training courses, so that will be very, very specific and targeted towards everyone in Scotland. You can do, if you're doing it within your organisation and you believe that face-to-face is good, then, and you've got the space and the logistics to carry that out, then you can do it that way at present. Your training should be, when you're looking at staff and volunteers, you're coming at it from what we would consider a foundational level. So you're looking at establishing what are the types of abuse and what might that look like. But if you have something observed or you have a disclosure made, what is it we're actually talking about? In Scotland, we're considering the national practice model as well, which really underpins everything to do with children and young people. And most people have seen that somewhere. So if you're coming from education, your children will talk about effective contributors, responsible citizens, and so on. You're coming from healthcare or nursery education or social care, you'll be familiar again with a very similar model. Everything is based on this national practice model, and that's what we use. We talk about GERFEC, getting it right for every child, and that's what we use as a core base to look at, is it a wellbeing issue in a child's life? Is there something that's not quite right that can be rectified with a bit of support, or is it a more significant safeguarding issue, and therefore we need to take more definitive steps involving statutory services? So your training should then go on to look at the roles and responsibilities of people within church, in particular who your safeguarding coordinator is, what they do, and why you should use a system of a point person. It should also look at where to go to get your advice. It should look as well at what to do when a disclosure happens. How do you handle disclosure? And again, it's about a whole team approach. You may be the one person who the child discloses to, but it's not your burden to carry alone. You are then taking that to your coordinator, and they are then liaising if needs be. If that ultimately, there are some cases where senior leadership and trustees may need to know that something serious has happened. Particularly if you are a trustee out there or a church leader, there are certain statutory obligations actually that OSCR expect of you as well in respect of safeguarding. But that is not the concern of most of your volunteers. There are thresholds and depths of training as well, depending on where your staff are at. Things to highlight in training and equipping your staff is that when children come back after lockdown, and young people as well, don't expect them to be exactly where they were when you met them face to face 7-8 months ago. Children have been at home for months on end, and many of them are presenting back in schools with signs of trauma. If any of you out there are teachers or you know teachers, you'll hear the chatter about behaviour and just noise levels and activity as children are having to relearn how to sort of behave and function in school. And what's happening is trauma in children doesn't come out like trauma in adults. Children don't have the words necessary to express their feelings and emotions as adults perhaps would, so it comes out in their behaviour. So you've got to, teach your volunteers and your staff as well, equip them with the skills to realise, actually, if that child's misbehaving, let's make sure we don't actually create another wellbeing concern by raising our voices to calm them down. Let's talk to them quietly at their level and re-engage and reconnect with them slowly. The other key thing to really remember when you're looking at equipping your staff is they should have access to your safeguarding policy. If we're going to teach people to safeguard children, we need to know what the foundation of that is, and your training should reflect what's in your policy. And that should be reviewed regularly. As COVID-19 ebbs and flows, some people are working on a hybrid approach, some stuff's online, some is in real life. And you do need to be prepared to review your protocol and practice and pass that on and equip your staff with that updated knowledge as well. Really, really important in terms of training. So
that's amazing, Leigh. That's really helpful. I know you could literally give us advice all night, but we've had a question come in from Ali Wilson. Hi, Ali. She, I'm just going to stick it up on the screen here for you to see.
Okay.
It says, looks like we might be doing more outdoor youth work until our halls open up again. Have you got any suggestions about what extra things to watch out for to keep safe? I'm guessing she's meaning in the outdoor realm, because we spoke quite a bit about online, but what does it look like getting back to normal, if there ever such a thing exists?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question, Ali. Thank you very much. So when we're outdoors, we need to consider it is a different environment from when we're indoors in a hall or in a room or in anywhere in a building. So when you're looking at your outdoor work, the first thing you've got to do is risk assess that environment, and I do appreciate that. All we seem to do these days is risk assess, and we do a risk assessment and suddenly then the government bring out a different mandate. We have to think again how we do our youth work and how we practice children's work. But we've got to remember that outdoor environment, whilst it may be familiar to yourself, it may not be familiar to children, and there are inherent risks in that environment. So, for example, if you're taking children into a rural environment, so you're taking them outside the city or outside the town, how familiar are they with that environment? Are they turning up with the right clothing and especially the right footwear? It's really, really important that we're not putting them at risk because they're too cold, or they go over their ankle because they're wearing, flip-flops instead of sturdy boots. So we need to look at that. We also need to consider if it's an urban area, are they far enough away from other people so we can maintain social distancing, so that whatever activity you want to carry out, you've got the physical space to do it in as well. And we need to remember that that's a change for children as well in terms of being outdoors as much as they're going to be. And again, they are adapting to that. We've got to remember they've got resilience. Certainly at the minute, they're getting all the PE lessons outside in all weathers. So they are used to that. And it's making the most of that. Within that, you also need to consider, are there children in your groups who've perhaps got particular physical disabilities or additional support needs that might actually change how they interact with that environment? So, for example, if you have a child who's a wheelchair user, they can get about the church building because everything's on the level, there's appropriate ramps in places and so on. If you take them outdoors somewhere where it's rough ground, how's that child going to get about? Okay, that could potentially exclude them, and we want to make sure that they're actually included because they are just as an important part of that group as anyone else. If that is a child as another example, or a young person who may have additional support needs and again feels very secure being inside a building, suddenly you take them outside the building. What preparation have we given them? Have we told them in advance, well, your youth group's meeting outside, or we're going to go to a particular place? And do you have a leader assigned one-on-one to support that child when you're outside, to make sure that their needs are met and that they're not becoming overly anxious or overwhelmed because of what's going on? Again, in safeguarding terms, you also need to consider, if you're taking your youth group outside, what access other people have as well. If you take them to the local park, is that safe? You know, if you go on a Friday night, they want to kick a football about, if that's the local park will say the connoisseurs of Buckfast hang about, are they going to be harassing your kids? And so on. So all those things need to come into play, but it can be done really well and really successfully. The outdoor environment is an amazing opportunity and space that we have. And I have to say, I do get what it's like taking kids in the outdoor environment. Before this job, as Des said, I was a teacher and my subject was geography. So just to give you an example, when you're filling in a risk assessment to take kids to Iceland and you're putting volcanoes, glaciers, earthquakes, and so on, it's a dangerous environment, but probably one of the best memories kids will have is what you do outdoors rather than what you did in the hall. So yeah, amazing. Go for it, do it safely, do it well.
I love that. Risk assessments with volcanoes. That's what we need more of.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Great question, Ali. Thanks. Yeah, so we're having a chat about if anybody else has got any more questions, feel free to fire them in. I know that Leigh probably doesn't really want to answer them, but I'm going to keep throwing them at her anyway. Yeah, like maybe you could just give us what would be like your 5 top tips? Like, what would be your golden nuggets? Like, if there was stuff that we really wanted to kind of take away and just keep in our pocket for should something comes up, what would that be, Leigh?
First of all, I think, thank you, that's another great question, Des. Tip number 1, safer recruitment. I cannot emphasize that enough. Increase your thinking beyond PVG, okay? PVGs are really important, but they're part of a wider, more holistic process. And that is especially important at the minute, because again, some of the statistics and feedbacks that's coming from charities and churches is that volunteer numbers are down because of the present situation. Don't let that pressure to put something on and you not having enough volunteers mean that your safer recruitment slides. PVG is one part of the process, but it's also about how you actively recruit people. Have you got a role profile in place to give people an idea of what it is you want them to do? Also, a role profile can help attract the right person to the role as well as put off the wrong person. Have you asked them for, at least if it's a volunteer role, 1 reference from somebody who's known them for more than 6 months, so that you're getting somebody else's viewpoint on that person's character and their integrity? And then as they start volunteering, are you training them not just in their safeguarding, but in everything that they need to do to be competent in that role? And are you debriefing them and getting regular feedback from that person as part of that ongoing process? So yeah, safer recruitment is number 1. 2, training and equipping, really, really important. Good quality training will stand you in very good stead. And it's also important to realise that when you're training within the faith-based context as well, very, very often people say, well, I've done it in school, I've done it elsewhere. And that's great and that's good and that's to be encouraged. But where we're working and where we're ministering to children and young people, we have something quite unique about the faith-based context. And we need to frame our safeguarding within that and understand that actually there's a biblical mandate for what we're doing as well as a legislative mandate to do that. Policies, the word that nobody likes to talk about, safeguarding policies. Again, these are vitally important documents. They underpin a lot of what you're doing. The policy informs your practice. Writing policies is not easy. And again, at 31.8, we want to support you with that. So we have on our website, we have a members only area, and if you go into that area of the site, if you're a member, and if you're not, we actually have a special offer in the minute for Scotland members. We've got 25% off your first year's membership. And if you go to that link, it takes you to a special page where it'll automatically factor in that discount. But we have policy templates, we have policy guidance, everything is there. We work off 10 safeguarding standards, and everything is there to help you place in a bespoke policy for your organisation, for the type of work you do. It's up to date. We review our stuff regularly that we advise on. So when legislative changes come out, then we will pass that on. When practice improves and changes, we will pass that on through not only the online safeguarding manual, but the information we send out to our members. With that in mind, we just talked about legislative changes there. This perhaps ties back, Des, to the first point about PVGs. The law changed in Scotland last month in respect to PVGs, and not many people seem to be aware of this. It's not had perhaps the public launch it would have had under normal times. But PVG checks used to be for life. They are no longer for life. It has a 5-year duration. So some of you who are in that coordinator role or are responsible for the admin of PVG checks within your organisations are going to need to go back and start planning and preparing as to who needs done this year, who needs renewed next year, and so on in that 5-year rolling cycle. PVG scheme also used to be voluntary. It's now mandatory, and that is really, really important that, again, you're operating legally as well as ethically in what you're doing. And then, fifthly, I think the really important thing is use your safeguarding coordinator and use 31.8 to support you. Your safeguarding coordinator, it carries out quite a unique ministry within any organisation, and very often it is just them and a deputy or a small team. So do keep them in your prayers. Use them appropriately. Use the structures in place, especially if it's something serious. When you then, at some point, somebody in your organisation has to go and liaise with statutory services, using your internal systems and mechanisms means that when the statutory services say, can we have a copy of your report, who is our liaison person, everything works as it should do, and that's actually hopefully much better for the outcome of the child involved. But I think actually we just stick a tip 6 in there, Des, as well. It's really important to remember why you do what you do, that safeguarding is not to make you worried and stressed. It is to create safe spaces for you and safe spaces for the young people that you're working with. And that certainly is very much my heart for safeguarding, is that when children are coming into our events and our ministries, that they're there to have fun, they're there to engage with each other, they're there to engage with Jesus, and they can do that in a safe way. And whatever interaction they have with you, they're taking that back out into the rest of their lives. So we at 31.8, we really want to have excellence in our safeguarding standards, and we want that for you guys as well. So that kids know that when they come to a church event or a youth event, that this is somewhere where I am safe, and this is somewhere where I can trust the leaders, and if I've got a problem, they really know what to do.
Yeah, and speaking as somebody who, as a church leader, when I worked in the church, had to use you guys extensively for a couple of situations that we had to deal with. Like, I can't speak highly enough about how helpful it was. Like, just having that information and knowing that it was up to the minute, it was correct, and that actually, regardless of what happened, I was doing the right thing. Like, I was following stuff to make sure that I was there. So I can't emphasize that much.
Many of the calls we get are people just checking that, am I handling this the right way? And it's reassuring for you to somebody say, yes, you are. And that's fine. We never mind. It doesn't matter if you ring us once or you ring us 10 times about the same thing. We will always listen and support you, make sure that you are continuing with best practice and that you're confident in what you're doing as well.
Amazing. Leigh, we've had another question come in here from Connor. Let me just stick this up on the screen. He says, hi, is there any new measures to think about when getting an indoor youth space back up and running on top of putting in COVID guidelines? I guess, is there anything else, like, you mentioned the disclosure change there. Is there anything else we really need to be aware of?
A lot of the practicalities that have come in, and the guidelines that have come out through sort of various youth work documents and government documents, that all still applies. Getting back to youth work, now that schools have been back for a while, we're actually in a really good position where we're starting to see evidence of learning from schools and how things work in real life and how they don't. So within your youth group, it's still making sure that, especially if you've got, older young people, that social distancing applies, that you can manage the activity within the space that you have, that if it's younger children, how do we safeguard against COVID-19? So I give you an example. Some of the churches that I know are working with things like, if children are doing crafts or colouring, each child has their own little pencil pot or pencil case, and in that are their set of colours, their sharpener, their rubber, and their name is on it. So they're the only ones ever using that. Other churches wipe down the pencils in between every single use. It's up to you what system works depending on the logistics, the size of your activity, number of people coming to it, and the number of volunteers you have to do these things as well. It's also making sure that children feel safe, and that they are not becoming overly anxious because leaders are quipping jokes about COVID-19, or because that for an adult might be funny, but for a child that can be very, very fearful. So it's just minding our language and our thoughts as well. If we are meant to be wearing face shields, then wear face shields. And again, if they were young children, what a lot of teachers have done in primary schools and found very, very successful is they're putting like little decorations and embellishments. If you imagine you've got your face mask here and they're decorating it around the edge, it softens the look of it, and that's more friendly for children. You need to also consider as well, if you're wearing masks, particularly with young children who are looking at the whole of your face for communication, they may not be able to communicate fully, and that can be quite anxious for that. And to give you an example, I know of one personally where a friend of mine was out with her daughter, and her daughter burst into tears in a shop. And the reason, it turned out, she couldn't understand why her daughter was crying so badly. Daughter couldn't see the bottom half of her face, and she thought her mum was angry at her because her mum had her sunglasses on the top, so the child couldn't see anything in terms of facial communication and expression. So we need to think practically about those things. We need to be reminding children, to use sanitizer, to wash their hands effectively when they go to the toilet, not to be touching each other's stuff or touching each other. Also checking that children are healthy before they come in. So a really good tip actually that I learned a couple of weeks ago in a meeting in my own church was, when kids come in, if you're taking their temperature on the way in to check that they haven't got a fever, if that child temperature's a bit warm, let them go somewhere for 5 minutes with their responsible adult who's brought them to cool down, because you might find the temperature's different. If that child has run the whole way to your group, or that young person has run, and particularly in Scotland, the colder nights are coming in and they've got layers on them, they come in, they're absolutely roasting, that may not be the true temperature. And you don't want a child sent home upset because their temperature was too high if actually it wasn't too high. So it's about practicalities. That's the really important thing. And if you're following the practicalities that have been put out by the government, and then you are safeguarding. There are safeguarding protocols built into those as well. And it's with all these things, it's keeping a healthy perspective on it. We want children to come to our events and know that they are safe. We don't want them frightened and worried about risk assessments. What about this? What about that? We want them just to come in and have a really good experience. So yeah, that was a great question. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks, Connor. That was good. Any more questions that you want to send in? Now's your last opportunity. We're coming up to the kind of end of our session together. Leigh, I was just wondering, so you spoke there about the members stuff. I'll just stick the page back up again. So just for anybody that doesn't know, like, what does that look like? How does that all work together with 31A?
Brilliant question, Des. Thank you. So our members, Our membership fee is usually £129 a year, so it's actually really good value for what you're getting. So it's just over £10 a month. I think if anybody's better at sums than me, please tell me, because my maths is terrible, Des. But yeah, and that's what we're offering, 25% off for the first year. So our members get access to the members area on our website, and as I've said, you get access to our online safeguarding resources. Our members also get discounts off 31.8 training. You'll get our regular members magazine. You get our monthly news emails sent out to you as well. But on top of that, we have a host of other services that we do that are available actually both to members and non-members. So we are very much known for our helpline and for our training, but we'll have a lot of consultancy services that run in parallel, in conjunction with these things. So we can do everything from safeguarding audits of your organisation to look at best practice. We can do case reviews and look at past cases, and we look at where it went wrong, how you change that, how we address those things within your organisation. We're also involved in international child protection. That is a massive growth area, particularly after the Oxfam scandal in 2017, that a lot of organisations are having to consider as well. We offer a listening service. The survivor voice is really, really important to us, and we want to provide a mechanism where appropriate that we can listen to people and support them with that as well. If you're down in England, if anybody happens to be from England who's joined us, we do have a DBS checking service. Doesn't apply in Scotland because the Scottish Government are kind enough to facilitate the checking of your PVGs through Volunteer Scotland. If you're a registered charity. So yeah, there's quite a lot of things you get for your membership. We are constantly looking at how we can better serve our Scottish members, and that's why if there's something in particular that you think, do you do this or you should be doing that, then do give us a shout. info@318.org, and it will get its way back to me. If you're wanting to find out more about what we do, check us out on our website. We have about 10,000 members all across the UK, and very much people will say to us that the annual membership fee is worth it alone just to get access to the online safeguarding manual, and to know that material is constantly updated and is constantly based on best practice. So yeah, it is absolutely worthwhile to do that, and I'm certainly very passionate about making sure that Scotland and Northern Ireland, these are my two regions in particular that I work with, are doing best practice by people they're working with, and we don't just focus on children either. I know that tonight we've talked very much in children and young people context. We do a lot of work around safeguarding adults as well, so we can support you in that area as well. But we want to make sure that the people you work with are safe, that you're engaging in best practice, that you are meeting all the legislative as well as the cultural and the theological practices that we have, so that when people look at your organisation, they're saying, those guys have got it right. They work with excellence in every area of the ministry, and that's how we see ourselves as being your support to do that.
Amazing. Leigh, thank you so much for your time, pal. I really, really appreciate it. And as I said, over the years, I've got in touch with you guys at numerous different points with numerous different things, and I can only sing your praises highly enough. Like, it's just so reassuring to know that there's people out there that are just switched on, that get the Christian culture, that understand how churches work, and have just always been there whenever it's really difficult times and you just need that support, So, so thank you so much, pal. And if people want to get in touch with you, you said your email was info@318.org. Is that the best way?
info@318.org. Yeah. And again, whether that's a generic question you have, or if you've got a specific question about a particular safeguarding issue, do ring the helpline. Any one of my colleagues in the safeguarding advisory team will be more than happy to help you with that and advise you accordingly. So that's so I'm going to do it. 0303 003 1111.
I'm very impressed you remember that. I can never remember any phone numbers whatsoever. I've just stuck the help there as well. That's 0303 003 1111. There you go.
Yeah.
It's like a proper show now. We've read out a phone number. Right. So.
We are.
Yeah. Leigh, I'm just going to call it a day there. I know that people will be checking in and sending you messages. And if you're struggling to get a hold of Leigh and you want to chat anything through, feel free to get in touch with any of the Deep Impact team or myself directly. We'd love to hear from you, and we just love to help. So if there's anything at all we can do, just let us know. Thanks, guys. I hope you have a great night. Cheers for joining us. And Leigh, thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.